This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Libya's government of national accord consolidates its control of the capital, Tripoli. Demonstrations against racism continue in the U.S. and other parts of the world. And the World Health Organization now recommends wearing of masks to combat the spread of COVID-19. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at other stories making headlines this hour. Troubled South African airline asks for extension before a draft rescue plan is published by its creditors. And an African establishment develops a homegrown teleconferencing solution during the coronavirus pandemic. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. Let's get started. We begin in Libya, where forces loyal to Libya's government of national accord have overrun their rival's last Western stronghold, the city of Tarhuna. The recapture now means the GNA administration has full control of Greater Tripoli right up to the city limits. The Libyan National Oil Corporation has condemned Turkey's recent announcement of oil exploration plans in Libya's waters. An agreement between Turkey and the Libyan government of national accord has redefined the Mediterranean's water borders, creating joint borders between Turkey and Libya. The move has been opposed by the EU and countries including Greece, Cyprus, and Egypt. Here is CGTN's Adel Al-Mahroui with the details.
Turkey says it could start oil explorations in Libya's waters by October this year. Ankara has gotten the green light from the UN-recognized government of national accord, which Turkey has been supporting with fighters and arms against the eastern-based Libyan National Army.
The move is clearly drawing the reasons behind Turkey's support on the government of national accord. It is interested in Libya's oil riches. It also wants to expand influence in North Africa. In the peak of the Libyan fight and division, Turkey has become the only entity getting benefits from further oil explorations in the East Mediterranean.
All Sarraj's rivals from the Eastern Parliament and the LNA have condemned the move. Surprisingly, the Libyan National Oil Corporation, which is under Sarraj's management, has joined the rejection. In an official statement released on Tuesday, it says, quote, "The GNA agreement violates UN law, which states that dividing maritime or land borders is a sovereignty issue and cannot take place if one of the nations is under exceptional circumstances."
The NOC manages oil companies whose main production comes from East Libya, but the Libyan National Army doesn't have the power to control the oil ports or even manage against Turkish ships in the Mediterranean to stop these exploration violations because it's heavily engaged in the civil war. There is also the issue of how the revenues of these possible new oil productions will be divided.
Turkey and the GNA have signed an agreement last year drafting their own water borders in the Mediterranean Sea. Their deal disregards Greek and Cypriot water borders and challenges natural gas projects they've been planning with Egypt and Israel, which means that the planned explorations could be taking place in disputed economic zones in the Eastern Mediterranean region.
Faiza Sarraj, the head of the government of national accord, is meeting President Recep Tayyip Erdogan this week. They will be discussing military and economic ties, of which will be issuing oil exploration licenses to Turkish oil companies. This is all happening while the fighting in Libya intensifies and the country sinks in its own blood. Adel Al-Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
French forces have killed Abdelmalek Djoukdel, the leader of Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb. French Defense Minister Florence Parly says the Algerian-born Djoukdel was killed in the town of Tessalit in Mali on Thursday. Djoukdel is said to have also commanded several affiliate jihadist groups across the Sahel region. French forces say many of his close associates were also neutralized. Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb emerged from a group started in the late 1990s by radical Algerian Islamists who, in 2007, pledged allegiance to Osama bin Laden al-Qaeda network. South Sudan's Deputy Interior Minister Mabior Garang has resigned, citing lack of progress in the country's implementation of the 2018 peace deal. Garang belongs to an opposition group led by the current first Vice President Riek Machar. CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports.
Mabior Garang is a son to the late John Garang, the South Sudan revolutionary leader and founder of the current ruling party. He says he quit because of insecurity in the country and lack of political will to implement the peace agreement. In a resignation letter addressed to his leader, Dr. Riek Machar, Mabior accuses President Kiir of having no intention to implement the peace agreement. The peace deal dictates that major towns and civilian centers be demilitarized, civilians be disarmed, and all former rival forces be united, but that has only partly been done. The resignation to many is a sign of frustration following the slow progress in the implementation of the September 2018 peace deal. Mabior was appointed in March together with other ministers in a new unity government. However, formation of the new government is not yet complete. The peace parties are yet to agree on the allocation of states, and the parliament is yet to be instituted. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Well, protests in the U.S. have continued into an 11th day in anger over the death of a black man, George Floyd, while in a Minneapolis police custody. Thousands marched through the New York City, and there were still demonstrations on the street at the 8 p.m. curfew time. Police at some protest sites are using force to enforce the order barring assemblies. In California, hundreds of protesters marched on the sand from Los Angeles Venice Beach to Santa Monica. They chanted and held signs reading "Black Lives Matter" and called out his name as they marched peacefully. Tensions decreased further in the U.S. Capitol, and a massive Black Lives Matter mural has been painted in yellow on a street near the White House. It was commissioned by the mayor. Muriel Bowser says the section of the 16th Street is now officially Black Lives Matter Plaza. Meanwhile, the Ghanaian government has held a memorial service in honor of George Floyd. A traditional ceremony was organized by the U.S. diaspora community and the country's tourism authority. During the memorial, people called for justice for George Floyd and an end to racism. Floyd's name has been added to a wall of fallen heroes of African descent at the W.E.B. Du Bois Memorial Center for Pan-African Culture in Accra.
We have to defend ourselves. We can no longer tolerate people killing us without fighting back. We have to fight back.
We just need the system to do what it already is supposed to be doing, to acknowledge that when people are being brutalized by the police, that the police should be held accountable. And when I say accountable, not just even fired from their jobs, but that they are criminally charged.
Indeed, we are one, united in spirit, united on a common agenda to fight injustice around the world. And we are also saying that it's our time that they escape to Africa. Africa is ready to receive our own.
George Floyd is not the first person to be brutalized and killed by the police in America, but he is the one that was murdered that caused the entire world to come together against racism and against brutality in America. So this has been a very important thing to me and fellow diasporans that live in Ghana and from around the world.
A group of activists have staged a protest march to the American Embassy in South Africa's capital, Pretoria. The Not in My Name movement was started by a small group of South Africans to tackle gender violence, but has since started dealing with other society issues, including racism. CGTN's Ulysses Jamela has the details.
The death of a U.S. citizen, George Floyd, at the hands of the police has not only sparked widespread protests in the United States, but in other countries as well. Here in South Africa, it has even inspired the governing African National Congress and its alliance partners to launch an anti-racism campaign. All that in support of the Black Lives Matter movement. The campaign includes a call for all South Africans to wear black every Friday for at least the next 3 weeks to show solidarity in the fight against racism. Ordinary South African citizens and civil organizations have also declared their support to the Black Lives Matter movement. A large number of Not in My Name protesters gathered here at the United States Embassy in Pretoria in support of the protests currently ongoing in the US. The march also calls to an end to recurring racism here in South Africa and an end to police and security force brutality.
The significance of us coming to the embassy is to stand in solidarity with the international community and identify with the Black Lives Matter movement. Should we not receive justice for our people, we will proceed with intensifying our mass mobilization on the ground and make sure that we'll come back stronger.
South Africa's government also released a statement earlier this week calling on all in America, especially security forces, to exercise maximum restraint in responding to the anger and frustration felt by many of its citizens. Yudisa Njamela for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
In Nigeria, where anti-rape protests have been ongoing, protests flared last week after a 22-year-old student was assaulted and killed. Protesters have been taking to the streets to raise awareness about violence against women and demand justice for victims. Some want the government to declare a state of emergency on sexual and gender-based violence. Sexual and gender-based violence has been on the rise in Nigeria. Experts blame the country's judicial process. They say cases take years to prosecute. Some victims and their families choose to be silent for fear of stigmatization and police extortion. The penalty for rape in Nigeria is up to 14 years in prison, but many culprits go free.
We want our inheritance rights to be respected. Gender and Equal Opportunities Bill. Who are those that are scared of it? It is these same people who are oppressing and suppressing women, and we are tired. So now we are here to say that anybody who has not said anything definite on sexual and gender-based violence actually has no business in political office. And we are calling for everybody, all human beings in Nigeria, to ensure that those people are out.
We must continue to build capacity of our policemen. We must continue to build a generation of police officers who can empathize with our women, who can show tact, who can show understanding, and who can work with victims, victims' family, activists, and other positive-minded citizens to combat rape.
There are really no laws guiding the woman and the girl child. So I think the police and the government should implement laws that will guide and protect women and girl children in the society.
Well, let's go back to our top story, where forces loyal to Libya's government of national accord have overrun their rivals' last Western stronghold, the city of Tirhana. The recapture now means the GNA administration has full control of Greater Tripoli right up to the city limits. CGTN's Cham Gona reports.
It was part of celebrations after forces loyal to Libya's UN-backed government recaptured Tirhana from East-based commander Khalifa Haftar. Tirhana was the main launchpad for Haftar offensive on Tripoli and the government of national accord. Haftar forces claimed the withdrawal was a humanitarian gesture intended to spare the city from destruction. Hundreds of people have been killed and around 200,000 driven from their homes since Haftar launched his assault on the capital more than a year ago. Opinions on the street of Benghazi varied on the withdrawal. Turkey's backing is said to have helped the GNA gain ground against Haftar.
Any honest patriotic person knows that the army's withdrawal is because of the intense Turkish drone air attacks that hit the army. So they had to withdraw, but God willing, our army will win, thanks to the wise leaders.
As for us, the Libyan people, we want victory for the army, God willing. Whatever GNA do, whether they bring Turkey, America or Italy, Libya and Benghazi, and the army will be victorious, God willing.
The two warring parties have resumed ceasefire talks. Haftar's side has threatened to resume military operations if the rival GNA administration does not commit to a ceasefire. Chamhono, CGTN.
Well, for more on the developments in Libya, we are joined by CGTN's Adel Al-Maroui live in Egypt's capital, Cairo. Adel, thank you for joining us here on Africa Live. Great to see you as always. Adel, first and foremost, the government of national accord appears to be making significant gains against the Khalifa Haftar-led forces. What more can you tell us about this?
The government of national accord has been the past week in terms of territorial the Libyan National Army. We've seen right after the government of national accord announced that it has pushed back Haftar forces from the entire Tripoli area, which means they now have full control over the Libyan capital. They kept moving forward, and now they have captured or regained control in the city of Tarhuna, which is considered the last stronghold that LNA forces led by General Khalifa Haftar had in western Libya. And the forces are still ongoing. They are now standing on the outskirts of Sirte, which is another stronghold that Haftar has gained and maintained control of since January this year. And as they progress, it means that the balance of power has now flipped. We've been seeing Haftar steadily progressing for over a year towards the capital, Tripoli. Have even earned some strongholds in areas there, but now they've been pushing back, and now the government of national accord is actually approaching eastern Libya cities, which are the strongholds for the LNA forces and the Tobruk-based parliament. So there seems to be a very strong sense, and we've heard Faiz Sarraj himself from Turkey announcing that he is not intending to stop this progress towards the east as long as they are making steady progress. He doesn't see that there is any necessity to hold his position, and this has been the demand for him for any form of negotiations or talks to resume. He have been insisting that the LNA forces retreat from the territories that they have been gaining since Haftar announced a campaign against Tripoli in April last year.
All right, Adel, thanks for bringing us up to speed with what's going on over there. That brings me to my next question. How are the developments in Libya being received regionally, and what kind of reaction should we expect from the international players in the Libyan conflict?
So right now, we know that there has been a significant progress politically, and that is the 5+5 military talks that has been led by the UN mission in Libya has been successfully accepted from both rival parties to resume these talks, which are a crucial file for the peace process or any political solution in Libya, is that to resolve the military conflict that is ongoing. Faiz Sarraj has been in Turkey since Thursday to speak with President Erdogan, the main supporter for his forces, and actually Turkey has been the reason why the government of national accord has maintained and got such strength in recent months. On the other hand, Khalifa Haftar, the head of the LNA forces, the Libyan commander, is now in Cairo. One of his strongest allies as well is Egypt, and there are reports that he will be speaking to President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi today. These are all indications that there is sort of political arrangement going on. The plans for the visits have been made before the government of national accord announces its territorial and military progress. Still, there will be efforts as all Libya's concerned regional and international powers are trying to push forward for the 5+5 talks to begin. But is how much territory each of the rival parts control, and that will definitely give them some weight in the 5+5 military talks when they start in Geneva.
All right, Adel Al-Maroui, thank you for keeping a close eye on that story. That's Adel Al-Maroui speaking to us live from Cairo. Let's get ready for the next segment of the show. Let's take a look at what's coming up ahead. The World Health Organization now recommends wearing of masks to combat the spread of COVID-19. And an African establishment develops a homegrown teleconferencing solution during the coronavirus pandemic.
How will your world change today? What happens here What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. Russia has reported nearly 9,000 new coronavirus cases, pushing the total number of infections to more than 458,000. Nearly 200 people have also died in the past 24 hours. The nationwide death toll now stands at 5,700. The government is easing coronavirus restrictions in the capital, Moscow, allowing businesses to partially reopen in the city. Among them, stores and service enterprises that do not require long-term contact between people. Beijing has officially lowered its emergency response level to COVID-19. Starting from Saturday, it will be level 3, just one level off the lowest. CGTN's Yu Yang looks at why the local government has made the decision now and what changes the move will bring to people's lives.
A total of 14 districts in Beijing have not seen any locally transmitted cases for over 90 days. And after the May Day holidays, as well as China's annual political season, the 2 sessions, there's no indication the disease will stage a comeback. The Beijing government believes the city meets the necessary safety standards and is now lowering its emergency response level. So what changes will the decision bring to people's lives? First, Beijing will lift the limits on plane and train tickets on people from central China's Hubei province, including those from Wuhan. And residential compounds will no longer need to take people's temperatures. In the tourism sector, parks, tourist sites and indoor public venues are allowed more visitors. Certain events, such as conferences, sports matches and entertainment shows, are also given a go-ahead, though under specific prevention and control measures. The city will also allow people from other areas to visit hospitals in Beijing, except those from medium and high-risk areas. Beijing lowered its emergency response to COVID-19 from the top level to level 2 on April 30th. But while the Chinese capital recaptures much of its old energy and gets back to normal, local officials believe some control measures are still needed to cope with the risk for imported cases. Yu Yang, CGTN.
Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro is threatening to withdraw from the World Health Organization. He's accused the WHO of being a partisan political organization. The WHO has disagreed with Bolsonaro's push to lift lockdowns while infections are still widespread. Brazil has the second highest infections in the world with more than 614,000 cases. In the past 24 hours, 1,400 new deaths were reported with a total of 34,000 deaths. The World Health Organization has updated its guidance on the use of masks to control the spread of COVID-19. And in light of evolving evidence, the World Health Body is advising that government should encourage the general public to wear medical or fabric masks where there is widespread transmissions and where physical distancing is difficult. CGTN's Tuli Shabalala has more on that. Let's take a listen.
Over the past several months, the world has been scrambling to curb the spread of the coronavirus. Countries locking down their borders and airspace. Governments urging people to isolate, wear protective masks, and exercise physical distancing. Prompted by evidence from studies conducted in recent weeks, the World Health Organization has updated its guidance on the wearing of masks to reduce the risk of viral transmission.
In areas with community transmission, we advise that people aged 60 years or over, or those with underlying conditions, should wear a medical mask in situations where physical distancing is not possible. In light of evolving evidence, WHO advises that governments should encourage the general public to wear masks where there is widespread transmission and physical distancing is difficult.
WHO says medical masks should be worn in areas that include public transport, in shops, or other confined and crowded environments. The organization has also released new guidelines on the composition of fabric masks, but has urged the public to continue using hygiene measures to prevent transmission.
Masks are not a replacement for physical distancing, hand hygiene, and other public health measures. Masks are only of benefit as part of a comprehensive approach in the fight against COVID-19.
The announcement comes a day after the UK government announced that it would be making face coverings mandatory on public transport, following months of claims that science was not clear on their effectiveness. Thuli Shabalala, CGTN.
South Africa's cabinet says the government will appeal a court ruling which declares some of its COVID-19 lockdown regulations invalid and unconstitutional. A group called the Liberty Fighters Network had launched a case against the lockdown restrictions. CGTN's Ulysses Jamela has more.
The High Court earlier this week ruled that regulations under Level 3 and 4 of the national lockdown had encroached on the rights protected by the Constitution. In its government, the court identified a number of instances of irrationality in the regulations. Government will appeal that decision and wants the appeal case to be heard on an urgent basis.
After obtaining legal advice and listening to numerous comments made by members of the legal fraternity, in reaction to this judgment, we are of the view that another court might come to a different conclusion. Government will ask that its appeal be heard on an urgent basis so that all of us can obtain certainty on the regulations.
Minister Mthembu says the government believes the decisions taken and the regulations declared under the National Disaster Act are lawful and rational, and they are set to mitigate the spread of the coronavirus and to save lives.
Cabinet wishes to assure the nation that all interventions introduced since the declaration of a state of national disaster in March 2020 by President Cyril Ramaphosa have been directed primarily at saving lives. The restrictions placed on the movement of individuals and on the level of activity in the economy have been directed at slowing the spread of COVID-19 infections.
At least one political economist agrees with government on this.
I think there is a huge opposition for the levels, mainly from business, and then they are trying by all means to frustrate the whole process so that they can go through with whatever they want, because they realize that level 4, it is not good for their business, and they were really uncomfortable with that, hence the contestation. But with regard to its constitutionality or not, I don't think that is an issue. The issue is we need to focus in saving people's life, and then the other things can come in as secondary, because when you look on the people that are working, mainly like your working class or people that are working in general work, mining and manufacturing sectors, are the ones that will be facing a lot of challenges.
The cabinet has stressed that while the appeal is underway, Level 3 regulations should be observed. Government is hoping that the court will now rule in its favor, because should government lose this case, the lockdown regulations will be dismissed and the National Disaster Management Act will effectively be unconstitutional. Ulysses Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
A Chinese-built makeshift hospital in Sao Tome and Principe is helping ease the African country's medical pressure. The hospital was designed by Chinese experts and built under the support of the World Health Organization. It started operation after more than 1 month's construction. It currently has 50 beds and can be expanded to 100 beds. The only designated hospital for COVID-19 in the country has reported 25 infected medical workers. China's 4th batch medical team to the country shared its experience with local medical workers. With the donation from the Chinese embassy to the country, the 4th batch Chinese medical team has also helped transform a local school to a second makeshift hospital for COVID-19 patients, which has a capacity of 70 beds.
I think that it's very helpful for African countries can have this opportunity to work with Chinese team, Chinese government to help us to improve and to make strong our health system. And I think that it's very good.
The Chinese medical team had taken an active role in building the hospital in the past month. COVID-19 patients will be gathered here for isolation and treatment. The Chinese medical team will work with people here to fight the pandemic together.
In Ethiopia, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has officially launched a push for the planting of 5 billion new trees during this year's rainy season. At a ceremony in the southern city of Hawassa, he told citizens he wanted the country to plant 20 billion trees over the next 4 years. Abiy's Green and Legacy campaign aims to promote ecotourism and transform Ethiopia.
This year, coronavirus came as a challenge, especially for planting in groups. But while coronavirus could challenge us, it won't stop us from achieving our desires and growth. I call on politicians to plant trees by suspending your political views for a while and engaging your followers.
The liaison office of the Central People's Government in Hong Kong says it has collected more than 130 written opinions in the Special Administrative Region regarding the proposed national security legislation. The office says the opinions are from the city's deputies to the National People's Congress and members of the National Political Advisory Body. The office will hand them in to the NPC Standing Committee. Earlier, over 1.1 million Hong Kong residents signed a petition supporting the legislation. Meanwhile, the proposal has been criticized by Chris Patten, the last British governor of Hong Kong. He says it violates the agreement made in 1997 when Hong Kong was returned to China. Well, according to a Kenyan scholar, the decision of China's National People's Congress on national security legislation in Hong Kong is of great significance to the stability of Hong Kong.
Government should allow a situation which leads to mass demonstrations and riots, which can then more or less ban the whole society to the negative impact on all the whole population. And sometimes some of the countries even never come up again. Therefore, I am in support of efforts to adjust the laws to be able to control extremism in Hong Kong and establish a stable environment.
Meanwhile, Stephen Shum, who is a Hong Kong citizen and the vice president of the Ghana Association of Chinese Society, says the new security will ensure prosperity and development in the region.
Only when the country is safe will Hong Kong be safe. Security in Hong Kong will ensure stability and development.
Well, the news continues on Africa Live. We've got your business news coming up next. Here's a look at the headlines. Troubled South African airline asks for extension before a draft rescue plan is published by its creditors.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. Comair's business rescue practitioners have asked the South African Airlines creditors for an extension for the publication of a draft business rescue plan. The airline is under business rescue, a type of bankruptcy protection. Angela Coppola has more.
They had originally aimed to publish the plan on 9 June, but have asked for this to be extended until the 23rd of June. Comair's business rescue practitioners say that management is still finalizing their financial results, and that information is needed to reconcile creditor claims with the company's records. They also want to continue discussions with some of those affected parties as they finalize that plan. The COVID-19 pandemic government regulations, of course, have locked down the country's airports and borders for more than 70 days now, grounding all domestic and international travel. State-owned SAA, of course, is also in business rescue, while SA Express is in liquidation. But there is light at the end of the tunnel, as the country is now in level 3 lockdown, with limited domestic air travel for business purposes now allowed. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Meanwhile, Somalia will resume domestic flights as part of its plan to ease pandemic restrictions imposed in March. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bello explains why authorities in the Horn of Africa country want to get their citizens back in the skies.
It's been 2 months since the Somali government suspended domestic and international flights. However, despite a high infection rate of the novel coronavirus, the Horn of Africa nation has announced plans to resume domestic flights in efforts to restart the economy.
There will be great changes from the way we used to travel before the pandemic. We have created new guidelines on how people purchase tickets and travel from one destination to another. We have given training to airline staff and equipped them with the right protective gears to limit the spread of COVID-19.
Somalia has more than 2,000 confirmed cases of coronavirus, with the majority of deaths and infections recorded in the country's capital. Meanwhile, at the Aden Abdullah Airport, preparation to reopen the facility is complete. Airline officials say they will support government's efforts of containing the spread of COVID-19.
The infection rates seem to have gone down, but we will play our part in providing awareness to our clients to use gloves and face masks, clean their hands, and practice social distancing.
The coronavirus pandemic is having an enormous impact on the aviation industry, affecting passenger traffic, air cargo demand, and airport workforce. In Somalia, most airline companies, including travel agencies, are now back to work after recording massive losses in the past months.
The travel restrictions forced us to lay off our staff since there was no source of income. We struggled to stay afloat since we had to pay rent, water, and electricity. We tried to pay our staff, but it was not like before, so we welcome the resumption of domestic flights.
The biggest transit hub in the country recorded more than 80,000 flights in the first half of 2019, creating huge revenues for the Somali government and allowing international airlines to fly directly into Mogadishu. Health officials now hope that international flights will follow suit. However, passengers will have to undergo mandatory tests before arriving in the country to avoid overwhelming the country's weak healthcare system. Abdulaziz Bello, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Tunisia says plans are in motion for direct flights between Tunisia and Beijing, but a restart date has yet to be announced. Authorities estimate the number of travelers from China may eventually reach 120,000 each year. CGTN's Adnan Chouachi has that report.
The Ministry of Transport and Logistics announced that the Tunisian government will provide all logistical and human needs to ensure the success of this airline.
We're working hard on establishing the first direct flight between our two countries. China is another world with over 1.3 billion people. It's a huge market. The Tunisian destination interests Chinese travelers.
The Ministry of Tourism noted that his departments have signed many agreements with Chinese tour operators and travel agencies to welcome tourists from China after opening air borders on June the 27th.
Cooperation with Chinese tour operators started before the crisis. Now we can continue this ambitious objective. Chinese tourists are visa exempt.
Mohammed Ali Toumi added that Tunisia is ready to host millions of tourists in the summer if the epidemiological situation remains stable in the North African state.
International tourism experts assert that Tunisia is among the 7 best tourist destinations after the COVID-19 crisis. We are anticipating a return to normalcy in the next few weeks. At least 18 regions across Tunisia have been declared coronavirus-free, where we have not recorded a single infection in 40 days.
According to the monthly report of the Central Bank of Tunisia, tourism revenues have dropped by 36% to $300,000 at the end of May, compared to the same period in 2019. The revenues of this vital sector hit $1.4 billion last year. The COVID-19 pandemic has had a significant impact on the tourism industry due to the resulting travel restrictions as well as slump in demand among travelers. The tourism sector contributes to around 14.2% of the GDP and guarantees job opportunities to a minimum of 1.2 million Tunisians, including 400,000 direct jobs. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Meanwhile, in Egypt, a number of hotels have been approved to resume operations at a limited capacity. Approved hotels can only operate at a maximum of half their usual capacity. CGTN's Jane Keogh takes up the story.
An on-site clinic with a resident doctor, regular temperature checks of guests, and a quarantine area. These are some of the government safety regulations hotels in Egypt are employing as they try to attract domestic tourists.
Yes, with the certification of the authorities, we've in the month of May been able to take our occupancy up to 25%, and now in June we can take our occupancy up to 50%. So, you know, the arrangements that have been made are building hopefully confidence for guests to feel that they can return to hotels because the arrangements that we've made have their best interests.
Thank God we have abided by all the rules laid out by the Ministries of Tourism and Health. We have cancelled all buffets, all weddings, and we have cancelled conferences as well. We have cancelled events that require large numbers of people. We started implementing protocols of sanitization and disinfection from before Eid.
Egypt is one of the African countries that has recorded the highest number of COVID-19 confirmed cases. Currently, 29,767 infections have been recorded, 1,126 deaths. This has resulted in huge losses for the country's tourism sector, estimated at $2 billion. Although airports remain closed to all but domestic and repatriation flights, 99 hotels have been allowed to reopen at a quarter of their usual capacity if they meet strict health and safety protocols.
They've sanitized my bag. I've also done the keyless check-in, which is the first time this has happened and the first time I've seen this. I didn't touch anything, even the elevators, until I entered my room upstairs.
Tourism in Egypt is one of the main sources of foreign exchange, accounting for about 5% of the GDP. The government says it hopes to increase the permitted occupancy rate of hotels to 50% by the end of June. Jane Keogh, CGTN.
Tens of millions worldwide have suffered job losses or a drastic reduction in income amidst the pandemic. In Kenya, many who fall out of formal employment are opting to venture into private enterprise. CGTN's Astatal brings you the story of one woman from the slums of Kibera fighting to ensure she survives and thrives even after this pandemic.
Margaret Awino is no longer welcome here, a charity she has worked for the last 15 years. She used to look after several disabled children. Her employer now fears that she could be exposed to the coronavirus because she lives in Kibera, Nairobi's largest informal settlement.
My boss feared that since we came from Kibera slums, we might infect them with COVID-19, and so he let us go. I have many children and it's hard to pay the rent. I have a child with special needs who requires medical care. I don't have anyone to help me with the medical care or food, and I don't know how I can go on with this life as we don't know when the pandemic will end.
The 54-year-old has now opted to sell fried chicken in her neighborhood.
Ever since I was fired because of COVID-19, I put all my efforts into my business in which I sell fried chicken. It is helpful to me. It makes little money that I can use to raise my children.
Her new business also has its set of challenges. City officials and health inspectors sometimes raid street vendors, who then face arrest and have their goods confiscated. For business owners like Awino, there are limited options, and they have to endure the risk in order to support their families. Astatal, CGTN.
You're watching Africa Live on CGTN. We'll see you on the other side of the break with more stories. Here's a peek at the headline. An African establishment develops a homegrown teleconferencing solution for use during the coronavirus pandemic.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. The COVID-19 pandemic has impacted how we live, learn, and work. Many around the world are still under some form of stay-at-home order. Usiku Games, a mobile game studio in Kenya, has created the first ever teleconferencing system in Africa to support those studying or working from home. CGTN's Nick Mundima tells us more.
In the heart of Kenya's capital city, Nairobi, we meet Jay Shapiro, the founder of Usiku Games, who has boldly taken Zoom and Skype head-on by creating Gumzo, which means chatting in Swahili, the first ever teleconferencing system in Africa.
When COVID hit, we realized that people are suffering through anxiety, loneliness, separation. And so for the first time, people across Africa are turning to video conferencing, using tools like Zoom, WebEx, Skype, that sort of thing. And we realized that there's some really fundamental problems with those tools. And so we decided to create a better one.
For Gumzo, all you need is a phone number which is validated through SMS. This means that every person who was on the Gumzo communication platform has a validated phone number to avoid problems like Zoom bombing.
With us, in order to come into a room, you have to knock to get into the room. The host can see your live video face, your name, your phone number, and can decide whether or not to let you in.
Gumzo's founders also had the education sector in mind when they created the platform. The system can take an unlimited number of users and has a user-friendly interface. The service is free for users and costs $1 per week for those who want to host their own meetings, with 50% of the proceeds going to the COVID-19 kitty.
We can support hundreds of users within our platform, but we've also built in the ability to do YouTube live streaming. So you could have a small room with just your 50 favorite friends or VIPs, have a chat with them, and then have an audience of thousands or millions on YouTube.
For other users who shifted from Zoom and Skype, the latest innovation is also a recipe of belief and hope.
The quality of video and the quality of sound is very, very good. This is because I'm made to understand that the server sits in Kenya and they also sit in SA. And the company is also planning to have more servers around Africa. So that makes it very easy in terms of low latency when it comes to quality of sound and the quality of video. This is African solution, and we've beaten people with other solutions before.
But as much as the system offers a user-friendly platform to its customers, there's also the aspect of celebrating good as a societal bigger picture during this COVID-19 pandemic.
There's literally hundreds of millions of dollars leaving the continent to go to platforms like Zoom at a time when we need that money here in the local economies. And so by creating a local platform, the money stays in Africa and helps to facilitate regenerative growth and creating jobs.
It is the first video conferencing system made in Africa. I know you're used to Zoom, you're used to Skype, but Gumzo has come with a work of relief. Remember, the servers are right here in Kenya, meaning you're assured of quality, you're assured of consistency, and of course the latency is also something to actually admire. Nick Mudimba, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
And we're not done just yet. We've got your sports news coming up after the break. Here's a look at the headline. Veteran South African midfielder Dean Furman bids farewell to domestic football.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to Sport on Africa Live. We start our football news in South Africa, where Dean Furman has parted ways with his club SuperSport United. He says it's in order to be closer to his family.